Welcome, everyone, to tonight's webinar. Uh, as usual, we'll start with a description of what is energy healing, followed by 3 minutes of silence, followed by the prayer of gratitude, and then dive into tonight's topic. It's good to be here. It's good to be with all of you. Thank you for the questions coming in. That always kind of helps give a little shape to the direction of the session and so forth. So energy healing is a technology for using consciousness to affect the body. And it's based on the premise that the body is essentially consciousness. So we've got consciousness folding in on its own nature to affect consciousness, essentially. And we all know that when we fall ill or whatever happens, okay, thank you. Whatever happens, good or bad, in our world and in our life, that it all essentially unfolds from the field of self as we know it, who and what we are. So consciousness is the foundation or the source of all the experiences that arise and come to a person during their life. And when things go wrong, then it's possible to fold awareness back into the field of consciousness, back into that source. And a lovely question about that just came up this evening, so that's good, but which we'll address. But consciousness folds in on its own nature, and in so doing accesses that original source material from whatever the experience is. So when it comes to healing through consciousness or energy healing, the principle is that energy folds in on its own nature, consciousness folds in on its own nature, finding the seed or foundation of the imbalance or illness. And then, because of the nature of consciousness as awareness, it then influences that seed or source, that original form that gives rise to whatever the experience is. In this case, with healing, it would be illness. But, really, we can think of any of the types, all the different types of experiences that rise up in a person's life as being kind of, part and parcel of the entire life experience. And, as you all know, sometimes illnesses will roll out from other types of experiences, traumas, or big life changes, like a divorce or a move or something like that. Even an illness, a big illness can give rise to even other changes, other transformations. And so the whole thing's, quite tied together. But the principle is that if we work on it from the level of awareness or consciousness, then we're working at it from a point that is the most accessible, I would say, as far as being able to apply one's intelligence and understanding and wisdom to the situation in order to actually affect a change. Okay, so that's my description for this week. I hope it was all right. I hope it made some sense, especially to the new people. In the meantime, now we're going to go into 3 minutes of silence, because it is from that experience of inner silence that we access the infinite resources of the field of consciousness. That inner silence is the field of consciousness, right? So we close the eyes and we just allow awareness to experience itself. All right. I will do the timing. Don't mind the time. And I'll let you know when 3 minutes is up. And when it is, don't come out too fast. Take your time. Because the more time we give to the coming out process, the more of the value of consciousness we bring with us. All right. Thank you, everybody. I'm going to put myself on mute and turn on my clock. Let's close our eyes. right. Take a few moments to come out slowly. Welcome to this webinar, Accessing Your Infinite Potential, as we head in to the deep silence of winter in the Northern Hemisphere. The winter is harsh by nature, but there is a crisp clarity in the wintertime. The leaves have fallen and the inner structure of the trees and bushes is laid bare. And also because of that, the long nights that provide so much starlight to our world, different from sunlight. It's like a much more delicate, diffused light. More stars can be seen because the leaves aren't there. So there's a kind of a starkness into the period we're coming into, but it also reveals the underlying scaffolding of our world in a way that brings wisdom. There's a wisdom that comes with winter that we don't get with the other seasons, even though we also have to suffer the harshness. We're coming into this time, not just in this time of year, but as a species, as a collective. We have enjoyed living through the summer and the fall in our world. And it is good that the wisdom comes with the harshness, because the wisdom provides the resources required to survive the harshness. We are here together as a group to bathe in the light of that wisdom. And I am with you, as much bathing with you in the light as you are. We are the light together. We are the light that shines on the topic. It's a very abstract topic for this month, so there are a lot of places we could go. But I'd like to take it into places that are concrete enough that they provide all of us with resources that we will need to survive the winter. Okay. We're just going to start with a beautiful concept given to me by another one of our Europeans, who'll be with us tomorrow, no doubt. He offered me the word cocooning. Cocooning. And what does that mean, to cocoon? which is precisely the dynamics that take place in winter, right? The whole thing shuts down completely. It's as if the form melts away before it is reborn for the next cycle. But I know you've all heard me talk in the past about the idea of creating a good healing space. However, the healing space can be more than just time put aside for healing. There is a kind of embrace, like a self embrace. It starts in the back of the body and it kind of wraps around the body. And it provides the context for the physiology to produce the specific neurochemical arrangements that will best uphold the health of the physiology at any given moment. And we know that each moment is different. We know that the laws of nature are constantly rising and falling so that different laws of nature dominate at different times. As we go into the winter, the cocoon needs to keep us warm. And the warmth comes from the heart's compassion. The heart's compassion is a reflection in our own bodies of the infinite, unbounded, unconditional love of the Creator, the Mother of the universe, for each of us. Her love is the ultimate warmth. And her love, like all the fine things in the creation, conforms to the law of reflection. That as we feel our own love for ourselves and for those near to us, those we count in our circle of people we love, she is included. And she finds herself in us. She recognizes her reality within each of us as aspects of her body. And you know that the parent protects the child through the harsh winter, through the cold winter, keeping them close and warm and fed so that when the spring comes out, they come out shining. They come out born into new levels of their own self-expression. You guys, we've been through the winter before. Throughout history, every great empire has risen and fallen. So we stand now on the brink of the fall of another great empire. The stakes are a little higher because we are now a global community. The pattern never changes, but our ability to adapt to the process and our ability to intentionally respond to the pattern is something that we have control over. We control the way we respond to the flow of change that is before us. Starting with the warmth, starting with responding to the cold with warmth. I'm just looking at the principle of infinite potential, the way it lays out in the field of consciousness itself. Life is found in layers, right? And if we just look physiologically, we have these layers from like atoms or subatomic particles, right? All the way up through all the different little parts and functions of the physiology. And then from the physiology, there's a whole system of layers that goes out to the universe, right? We have our circles of friends and family, and then family and then friends, and then bigger circles of acquaintances, and then the whole town and the communities and the countries and the world, and then on to the galactic realities. And it really doesn't conceivably, it's not that it really ends, it's that it loops. There are loops. We have control over how we activate our, well, you access it, then you activate it. Okay. Because accessing and activate it kind of go hand in hand. Like, what's the point of accessing it if you can't activate it, right? So, sorry, I gave it the wrong title, but that's just what happens sometimes. I give it the title like months ahead, you know? Anyway, when we activate it efficiently from the present state, then the activation spreads out like ripples in a pond. And it activates to the smaller forms and it activates to the larger forms. And part of the process of activating the potential is, let's see, I'm organizing my mind for a second. Let's talk about accessing and activating first at just the very kind of gross individual level, and then we will talk about expansion. So, accessing is done through awareness. And the way we find a person finds their potential. Now, some of you guys, I've talked about this before. So some of you have heard me talk about this, but you know, we talk about it today in a new way. Oh, thank you. I just got reminded that I never did the prayer of gratitude. Oh, okay. We'll just take a break for a second and do the prayer of gratitude, and then we'll really dive into the meat of it. Thank you so much for the reminder. And thank you all. And thank you to the source of creation for being everything, for being all of us, for being all our loved ones, the whole universe, the connection between the unmanifest absolute and the entire universal field of its expression. Thank you for our webinar time, that we may use this time most effectively, efficiently, powerfully, valuably, and meaningfully for every single person here. Thank you to each one of you for coming here to be with me, for joining me for tonight's event. It is night, anyway, in America. So grateful to be with all of you. I'm so grateful that you have put your trust and faith in me to be the voice of our group. Thank you all so much. Okay. By the way, I might cough a little bit through tonight's meeting. Just saying, I'm coming out of a little health situation I've been in. So thank you for bearing with me. That's why I have my water. Okay. Awareness. Right. So the potential, what do I mean when I say potential? We'll talk about infinite later, but let's just talk about potential for a minute. What we mean by potential is we mean the spark of self that brought you here. We mean that little piece of personal intention that was left incomplete at the end of the last incarnation. That when everything that you were dissolved, the end of the last incarnation dissolved and dissolved and dissolved and dissolved and dissolved into the absolute. At the very end of that process, there was something of you left. Whatever was the last little piece of you left. Think about the event horizon in front of a black hole or something, you know. The event horizon shows all the last little expressions of whatever it is that got sucked into that black hole. You know, it's that kind of value. It's that last value of you. And as the soul is letting go of its material expression, everything that's not important is let go first. The last piece, the very last piece before the soul slips into that field of absolute silence and bliss and rest and comfort and wholeness, is the thing that was the most important to you. And if that thing, if it involves evolution in the human condition at all in any way, then we come back. We come back to that last little desire, that last little flop of the heart that was like, oh, but I didn't get to love in this way or something, right? That forms the seed of the next incarnation. And it washes, that seed gets washed. It gets washed and adored and refined. And you can almost say, like, again, in the winter, you know, it's laid bare and it's understood and it's seen in its depths from the light or the perspective of wholeness and totality. And when the time is such that the evolutionary flow in this world, which is governed by very specific laws of nature, right? Universal laws of nature. So the evolutionary flow in this world rises up in a way that it aligns perfectly with that little seed. Then you come. The seed, the essence of your nature that brings you into this lifetime is a kind of form of perfection. I'm going to cough. Excuse me. I guess I should like mute myself or something when I do that. Should I mute myself?
Do you want me to get you some cough syrup?
No, I just had some before I came. Sorry. My husband's taking care of me. Sorry, you guys. I'm coming out of a long period, about, gosh, what, 5 weeks or something, of having bacterial pneumonia. So it was really a big purification. It's a big purification. But anyway, I had all the tests done and I'm going to be okay. I'm finally I'm good enough. I can I can sit here in front of you and I can speak. So God bless. But yeah, I don't feel like I'm firing on all my cylinders completely, but you know, here I am. But also something is birthing in me, you know, and I thought, well, it's very interesting that I'll be here for the webinar at this time, at a time of such deep purification. So thank you for being with me at this sort of delicate and tender time in my life. I really appreciate it. Anyway, the point is, guys, the seed of self is perfect and it aligns perfectly with the evolution that's going on at this time in creation. And so we're at a time in the cycles of man where we've been through a period of such lovely fullness. I was reading my mother's memoirs, and one of the points that she brought out was that when she was a little girl, her dad needed to buy a car to drive from Virginia, I think, up to Ohio, drive the family. And he bought it for get this. Get how much do you think he bought the car for? $14. Did I get that right? Was it 14? It was like $11 or $14 or something just like like you can't even conceive of it today, right? Like who buys a car that runs, right? He bought this car that could fit his family and run, and he drove it all the way from Virginia. Oh, I remember. He bought it for like $11, and when he got to Cincinnati, Ohio, he found a car dealer who was willing to buy it off of him for 14. And he was like, whoa, I made $3, on this car. Like, how amazing was that? Like, you guys, like a car that costs $14, like everything. You could buy things like useful, valuable things for like 10 cents or 3 cents. You can't buy anything for 3 cents. It doesn't even cover the tax these days on things. I mean, it's just like, it was such a time of, there was kind of this lovely, um, like a feeling of freedom in a way, right? I mean, of course, obviously people worked for pennies, they wouldn't make much money during a day either. But so it's all kind of relative. But there was this kind of simplicity, I would say, with that, and times of fullness and sweetness. And we've gone through that time. And now we're in the time of the cycle that starts to get a little harder. So if we think of the cycle of evolution, it starts at the source of creation and it rises up, rises up, rises up, rises up. And then there comes this point where it has to go through a transition at the top where it stops, the rising energy stops, and the cycle begins to turn and then go back into the collapse. And that's where we are on a more collective level. And I say that because it's not so much what's happening around us or to us or with us that influences the way our soul and our body are cultivated by that experience so much as our response to it. So one of the values of energy healing is both to provide a map so that we can kind of see where we are and place ourselves well within the context of the collective and within the context of our own individual realities, as well as provide the resources to work with that. Accessing and awakening potential. So the potential, that fullness or perfection of yourself, is inside. And in the past, I've put different labels on different parts of the experience in order to provide maybe a little flavor of what that experience is like. And I've used the word in the past, sacred inner sanctum of the self, to describe the place where we find our potential. But if we want to think of it in terms of the layers of the physiology, it's deep, deep down at the very core, at the very basis of the causal body. And the causal body is like an ocean. It's very hard to navigate the ocean if you're a little swimmer. So you have to navigate the ocean in terms of regions or places, spaces. But of those spaces, there is a center space. And it is the center space of the causal body that I call the sacred inner chamber of the heart. So the causal body is vast like an ocean, but there is a center, there is a Brahmastan, there is a core. And It's only a matter of intending to go to the core that is required to allow your awareness to guide your awareness to the core of the causal body. It is the deep, innermost feeling level the causal body is of the field of consciousness. When we go in and we go in, we go in, into the softer, more abstract, more delicate layers of consciousness, and find our way into the softest of the soft, the most delicate of the delicate, all the way down to the gap between the unmanifest absolute ocean of pure source material and the first, most tender expressions of who and what we are. That's the causal body. There's the gap. The causal body is right there at the gap. And in the causal body is a center. And the center is like a star. It's like a radiant anchor that connects the unmanifest absolute source of creation to the whole universe through you. And it is beautiful, and unconditional love is there. And it's unconditional love because the impulse that brought you here, the impulse that's like the seed of your potential, aligned with perfection, with the impulse of the creator to create the creation at this time. Everything that's happening at this time, the evolution of the universe that's happening at this time, is in perfect alignment with that seed in each one of us. And it's a different seed. You know, the seed in me and the seed in you, each one is a little different. I mean, each one is a light. Each one is a light. Like in the wintertime, when the leaves fall down and the nights are so long and the sun is on the other side, we can look up and see all the stars. And we are like the night sky filled with stars. When we look at that pure potential in each person who's here, and it's beautiful. And the stars are all together like a big family, you know? And each person's potential is a beautiful star. Every star, there's no star that's not beautiful. All stars are beautiful. And they can each be so different. That deep inner silence, that deep star within the very core of each one of us is potential. It is your potential, your pure potential. And it is infinite because, as I said, it's like the anchor point between the infinite potential of being and the infinite expression of the universe. And it's perfectly aligned. There's no part of it that doesn't belong here, or that isn't part of this world, or that isn't a reflection of your truest essential nature. The beauty of working with one's potential. Oh gosh, I think I'm going to cough again. Nothing like bacterial pneumonia. Keep life interesting. Um, anyway, each one's so beautiful. The thing about the potential is that it's very, very abstract, but it still can act like a guide. It acts as a guide throughout the course of the lifetime to inform us at each point in the process of life's unfoldment. There's a feeling. The potential has a feeling. And it's, even though it's very abstract, it's very light, right? So, and it feels very like intimate and natural and personal and comfortable because it really is the the kind of the coalescence of your essential nature. It's the very kind of structure of our deep inner self. So we just take a moment and enjoy that. Let's just take a moment of silence. Let's take a moment of silence together and shine our stars, shine our awareness, our pure awareness upon that beautiful space within each one of us, within each person, within you, within you, within you. It's so good to get a good feel, a good clean feel for the brightness and the innocence and the beauty of that aspect of self. In the lifetime, we do lots of things. And sometimes we hit the nail on the mark, and sometimes we make mistakes, and such a big variety of experiences that come. But no experience overshadows that, that potential. I wanted to talk about it being infinite, but I'm being guided to talk about something else first. So it is. Because one's potential has a feel to it. And the feel isn't just the feeling of it like you were feeling an object that's outside you somewhere. The feeling is based on the way we respond to it in ourselves. When we feel our, and we just did this exercise. Everybody can take a minute to try to feel their full potential. Did some people notice that they could kind of feel that deep inner light within them? A few people maybe. And they say, "Oh, look, I see hands go up." A few hands go up. Very good, beautiful, beautiful. Oh, many hands. Oh, plus, 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 plus. It says plus, plus. This person plus so many others. Beautiful, beautiful. Think of it like a signature. Think of it like your signature. That when you do something or you go into a particular area and you like put your mark on it. And the signature of your pure potential marks the choices and decisions that you make in your life that are well aligned, that will guide you and lead you to the most, I would say, the most efficiently to your goal as an embodiment of the divine. Right? Like I had a choice tonight. Should I just like lay in bed with my hands over my heart, just lay in bed like this tonight? Or should I go and be with my loved ones and play in the waves of knowledge and being and explore our potential together? And that's where the light was. And the body has its own little compromises that it's going through. After all, we're not young anymore, right? So, there's always a little something here or there, I suppose. But often the sacrifice is for the light. We sacrifice, we go to the light. Sometimes that decision, the choice that we are led to by following that pure potential is Not the easy path, but it is essentially the path that counts, the path that's going to count in the end, in the long run, right? It was so, you guys, I have to tell you the story. So last week when I canceled the webinar, I was so heartbroken. I didn't want to cancel the webinar, hack, cough, dying, lots of, every time I breathed, my lungs were like talking to me, it was like, oh, I was such a mess. I was such a mess. And I did not want to cancel the webinar. But by a miracle, you guys, on Saturday, like I would say minutes, was it minutes? Minutes before the webinar would or should have begun, we lost our internet. And it was out the better part of the afternoon. Could you imagine? Could you imagine if I'd held the webinar last week? If I had decided, no, I'm not going to follow my potential. I'm not going to follow the light. I'm going to just muscle through this because I owe it to everyone and they paid me a bunch of money and I need to be there for them and I owe it and I have to and I gotta. And if I had tried to muscle my way with my lungs going every time I breathe, it was so bad. God. Anyway, if I had done that, we would have been like kind of in crisis over here because we would have literally lost our webinar with all y'all. You all would have been out there waiting to meet me, right? And be thinking, well, what the heck's going on? And is she not responsible? In an attempt, like if I had attempted to be really responsible by showing up for the webinar last week, in spite of how bad I felt, I would have left all of you wondering why I was so danged irresponsible. And of course, it would have been irresponsible to me for me to show up under those conditions. So, I mean, it's just when that happened, I was like, okay, universe, you're talking to me and you're telling me I made the right decision because we canceled the webinar early. I think we canceled it on Friday. Then everybody very gracefully, all of you guys very gracefully got an announcement. We're so sorry. It's going to be next week. Everybody knew what was happening ahead. Nobody was left thinking, oh my God, what's she doing? Why isn't she here? It was just so smooth. And if we hadn't, we would have been a big mess. So it doesn't always seem, when you follow that light, it doesn't always seem at the moment, it doesn't always make sense. But when you do it in the long term, it does make sense. And especially looking back in the long term, you'll see again and again. I'm starting to question myself because I'm going to cough again. In the long term, you'll see that you can look back and say, oh, yes, that step led to this step, led to that step. Yeah. It was when I canceled the webinar that the illness, which was getting worse, turned and started to get better. But it was too slow, you guys. It was just too slow. I got antibiotics. And I mean, even here, I'm like 4 or 5 days in with the antibiotics, and it's still, I don't know. Anyway, it's the most sick I've been in more than a decade. So some big changes going on. Anyway, let's come back to the potential, shall we? The potential guides and informs choices and decisions. It's like the light of wisdom inside of you. And as human beings, we can't always know what's going to happen in the future. We really can't. I guess I need to qualify that. But because part of the full potential or the pure potential is to be able to see through space and time. And that's the truth. Human potential is great. It's so great. What people can do with their consciousness is not to be underestimated. If you underestimate yourself, you will sell yourself short. And that would be a waste. So by following the lead of the light, by letting, and not somebody else's light and not what somebody else tells you, but that inner light of your pure potential will be the guide that takes you as quickly and efficiently and gracefully to the unfoldment of its nature within you. And what I see happening, because I'm watching in the group, is kind of like an oscillation back and forth a little bit between that unconditional love quality, which is part of the pure potential. It's the union. You know, the love is like a glue or gravity. You know, it brings forms together, and what it brings together in that area of potential is the divine, the absolute source of creation, with the form of oneself. So there's this, I see this oscillation back and forth. And one side of the oscillation is more like just this sweetness and innocence of unconditional love. But the other side are like the mechanics of union. So there's the softness, and then there's the mechanics of union, and the softness and the mechanics of union. And it's just, it's oscillating back and forth, but my hands are moving way more. It's like that, just so delicate, but at infinite speed and so delicate. And union, the union of totality that we experience as our awareness, because awareness is totality. Pure awareness, pure perception, pure consciousness is pure being, pure divine being, pure source. That's the union. Here's where the union is. It's in the awareness. As awareness, it is awareness. And it looks at the potential as the unconditional love and the union of form and source. And that finally brings me to the infinity. Now, you guys know I'm a big fan of Dr. Michael Levin, Levin. And we could probably put a link to one of his most recent that I was watching. His videos, the ones I really love, his short ones are great, but the ones I really love are the long ones, because he really gets into the guts of his topic, and his topic is just so deeply fascinating. And I'll see if I can find the video where this piece of information I'm about to pluck from his work comes, and I'll send it to you. But he works with organic forms and systems. And what he discovered was that consciousness or intelligence nestles. So what you have are, you know, starting down at a very deep level, like say, we'll look at starting at a cellular level, just to be practical, that cells can think of themselves as in the beginning, right? Like in the little soupy swamps that were sitting around on Earth when the very first one-celled creatures began to form. They were just like little individual guys. and there's one over here, and there's one over here. And they would sometimes, if this one was having an experience, he would produce some little chemical, some little proteins or something that would kind of ripple out into his environment like that. And this guy over here might pick that up. He might notice it. But because it's gone through a little bit of space, this guy over here thinks, well, that's his feeling. That's not my feeling. But somewhere along the line, the cells discovered. And so they had a certain amount of potential. We could say they have a certain amount of potential that they're experiencing as individual cells. But somewhere along the line, they discovered that if they get together and they're real close to each other, that if this one has an experience that gives rise to the production of some neurochemicals or something, this one will feel it almost like it's his own. And if they have a whole system, then what can happen is the experiences of the one become the experiences of the many. And the potential of the many becomes the potential of the one. Oh. We're talking about potential tonight, aren't we? Yes. Yes, it's very, very interesting that the cells discovered that if they got close enough to each other, they kind of got up and cozy with each other, that they could take advantage of each other's light. They could take advantage of each other's potential. So then if you have a group of cells, and so there's a cell down here who's in the wrong place, and he knows he's uncomfortable, and he's sending out signals, I'm uncomfortable, and he needs to be up here somewhere. Then what will happen is the entire collective of cells around him will kind of work together to help that one cell open up and be able to move up to the spot where it belongs. And it makes it easier for that cell to go where he needs to go because he has the support of the entire field of cells around him. And in the meantime, his movement into his correct spot in the collective brings blessings to the entire collective. And the systems nestle. They nestle. So when you find your pure potential, the light of your pure potential, and with your awareness, you've got that located and it's shining sweetly. What happens is the experience helps to cut through a lot of the boundaries and barriers that we create for ourselves on mental and emotional levels, because the experience is so abstract and it's so nourishing not only to ourselves as individuals, but to ourselves as collectives, both on the collectives going smaller, 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 and on the collectives going larger, larger, larger. So both, it's like a ripple in a pond, or a sound wave propagating through space, even more like a sound wave propagating through space. Because you think of the surface of the pond as kind of two-dimensional, but the space is more three-dimensional. It starts to line up the potential of the physiology. Let's look at it going smaller for a second. The potential of the different parts of the system start to line up with that potential that you are enlivening or awakening with your awareness. Awareness goes to the pure potential. It's like, oh yeah, that's my pure potential. Oh, I find it in things all around me. I find it in opportunities that come to my door. And I find it in choices and decisions that I make. And I find it in different sorts of impulses of intelligence that are rising up from within me all the time, right? Feelings, experiences. And that light of potential, as I mentioned before, it kind of cuts through a lot of the superficial fluff. When the light of potential is shining and it's really present in the awareness, then the feelings and emotions that rise up and fall are more like the ripples on the surface of the pond. They're sort of humming along and shifting along according to the laws of nature at any given moment. And the emotions give life some shape and interest and color, and they make it interesting, but they don't ever overshadow that pure potential. Then the emotions and feelings do not guide behaviors, choices, and decisions. They simply inform them. Emotions inform your choices and decisions, but what guides them is the pure potential. Same with the mind. Same with experiences of the mind. There are many experiences that the mind can have. But when the pure potential is there, it becomes the conductor of the orchestra. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. And it leads the heart, and it leads the emotions and the mind. They are led by that pure potential. Then the potential of each cell climbs on board. Then the potential of each system, each organ, each function in the body lines itself up like the ripples, propagating out, the sound frequencies propagating out from a musical instrument or something. Everything gets on board and lines up with it. And then what we see is that our bodies start functioning like the nesting or nestling systems of intelligence. You can imagine that the first time it happened, the universe cried, "Eureka, evolution," right? The first time cells started, instead of being their own little people or their own little selves in a separate place, they decide, hey, what if, I can feel that this guy over here is having some experience, and I understand that I'm not alone in this creation, and that there are many of us and we're kind of similar, and he has a feeling and I can also relate to that feeling. And so, Eureka, the universe cries Eureka. How many empires have risen up in their springtime, led by the powerful lion-like energies of their strongest people, and then enjoyed the summer of their reality as their militaries are pushing out expanding the boundaries of the empire, and their scholars and wise men are inside figuring out how to solve the country's problems, and the merchants are supporting the sales of products, and all the people are producing good. And it goes like that. It starts as it goes into the fall of the empire, the autumn, let's call it the autumn of the empire. The empire starts to get too big because the military always wants to push out further and further and further and further. That's what the military does. It's its nature. And I'm not saying it's bad, because it's really the military that gives rise to the original rising of the spring. Those are the individuals with that nature, that sort of lion-like nature, give rise to the spring. But then it becomes cumbersome, and most of the problems have been solved. So the scholars and the thinkers, instead of setting themselves the task of solving the problems of the empire, start to dream of what the ideal empire would look like. And sometimes they get it wrong. Sometimes they get it wrong, you guys. And because they're pencil pushers and because they don't want, because they're afraid of discomfort, unlike the military, right? The military side of the empire is not afraid of discomfort, is willing to go out there and willing to get their feet wet and willing to get a little muddy and so forth. But the pencil pushers aren't. The merchants become corrupted. And it all brings on the winter. And it's all for the sake of the next step of evolution. It's all for the sake of the individuals to become so, that potential, right? That potential to spread out and to become so integrated in the collective that each person does the right action at the right time in order to grace the coming of winter, so that rather than harshness and loss of life and failings, rather than that, it's a time of laying the truth bare and being gifted with the ability to see the inner mechanics, the inner workings of reality in a way that cannot be seen when the civilization is just trying to expand its borders and make its products and solve its problems, build aqueducts, and. The deep inner scaffolding, the revealing of that is the potential of the winter. And it's not something that can be seen from one point only. Or I would say it is something that can be seen from one point only, but it's not something that can be, that can bless the collective, unless the collective is moving together in that process to awaken the vision of the scaffolding from many points of light simultaneously. Yes? Like the bee's eye, right? From each point simultaneously, the scaffolding, the deep inner structure of reality is illuminated. And it is this that brings fulfillment to the winter. It washes away the harshness, that unconditional love, right? Washes away the harshness and the coldness of the winter. Guys, I can't believe I did all this talking. We have questions, and I didn't even answer all of them. How do we find the place of awareness? Oh boy. Okay, so the first question here is how do we find the place in awareness where the seed of illness is? And is it important to be able to distinguish all the levels that I described, causal, astral, etc.? And how would we recognize it? Okay, so our bodies heal even if we're not aware, right? Even if we don't know how exactly they heal, they still heal themselves for the most part. The body is working to heal itself all the time. So it's not absolutely necessary to find the seed with awareness in order for the healing to occur. However, in energy healing, obviously this question is from the angle of energy healing, the process is made more efficient by finding the seed and focusing awareness upon it. And the way I do it is I start with a symptom, because if there's some suffering somewhere, you know there's a seed in there somewhere. So you have to start with the part where the suffering is and bring awareness to the part of the suffering. And I usually use 3 different tools for finding the seed. This might be, yes, well, anyway, I go into this in a lot of detail in my workshop, but you can use inference, because our bodies are made in the image of the divine. And so every single part of the body reflects a different part of the way the wholeness shows up in the created world or the created reality. We can take this, I have this respiratory thing, for example, and I often use the respiratory as an example, but of course, people have come up with concerns in other areas in the past, and we've looked at other areas as well. But in the respiratory, we go from, it's a very quick cycle, right? The respiratory cycle is really quick. You breathe in, you breathe out. So you get a kind of like a Reader's Digest version of the cycle of reality, or the cycle of creation, which starts at the source of creation and comes out to the surface and then comes back again like that. So we've got that sort of cycle of creation being modeled in the respiratory system. And it goes from the air goes from being something that's very unbounded and very much sort of collectively held into the body, and then into the lungs, and all the way down into the alveoli. And then it goes in and it becomes part of the individual self. And then in there's a transition, right? That point where it goes completely in. Then there's a turn in the cycle, and it comes back out, and it reemerges into the air around us as a part of the wholeness again. So it goes from wholeness into individuality, and then back to wholeness. Or you could say, if we, in my imaginary bubble diagram behind me, which is not here right now, all I've got is this picture of the Grand Tetons, but we imagine, I've got that diagram here, right? So we've got the wholeness down here at this bottom point, and the relative material at that point, and it emerges up from wholeness. It becomes more concrete, more concrete, more concrete. And then there's like this spinning that occurs in here, spins. And then it is expressed, fully expressed as material creation. And then the material form eventually collapses back into wholeness again. So inference, something to do with Dorothy. I'm using myself as an example here. I'm modeling it for you. Something to do with Dorothy's relationship between individuality and collective, individual and collective self, universal self and individual self. Also very much on my left lung, mostly in my left lung. Left lung is the female, this is still inference, female side, cool, moon, the inner spiritual life, as opposed to the more fiery, outward, warm, masculine side. So it's from the angle of spirituality, the relationship between individuality and cosmic reality, wholeness. This is what's up for consideration. This is what's undergoing change. The transformation is there at a very, very intimate level of the relationship between me as an individual and my cosmic nature. And so much of it is in the bronchial tubes, and the bronchial tubes are where this big unbounded spins down like that, spins in the bronchial tubes like that. And then it goes into the alveoli. I don't know if it got all the way to the alveoli. It was mostly in the tubes, I think. So inference is one of the spots. And then intuition is another spot. And intuition is Intuition sits in the junction between intellect and feeling, essentially. And so the intuition that sits there is like a combination of the heart and the mind to a large degree. And so intuition will often sort of cue off of feelings. What are the feelings? What are the feelings? And for me, there was definitely a lot of grief. I think I went into a little bit more description with my workshop people about some of the events over the last couple of weeks and our relationship as a family with our community. Because as you all know, our country is currently suffering from the pains of division. And of course, you all know that I keep myself as non-political as possible in these webinars and in all of my work as much as possible. And also, I follow that through with all of my dear friends in my town where I live. But it just happened that our beautiful, honorable, powerful, gladiator like son won a local election for city council. Yay, Matthew. And when that happened, some aspects of politics that had been undercover and not so obvious got a little bit uncovered. Not mine, not my husband's, but our son's got uncovered. But you know how it is with families, it all reflects. It all reflects, it reflects, it reflects. And because the divisions are they're so like emotionally fraught at this time, we found ourselves dealing with friends and relations who were not happy with what was revealed. They were not happy. And it was a bit rough. Some of these people have been my friends since I like 40, 45 years. They have been my good friends. And now they're like, I mean, comments online were not very nice. And that's too bad that a very old friendship would be made less important in a person's heart than their political ideologies. So I encourage all of you who are listening to keep the priorities straight and know that the love that we have for each other and the power of our ability to work together and to adoringly support our communal evolution is far more important and valuable than political ideologies, which, as we all know, are frothed up by the mainstream media. And media on all sides and all places, they're frothed up. So don't let the frothing stop you from being practical and connected to your highest potential. Let your potential guide you through this. I know it's tough. It's really tough. But anyway, so these were some of the ways I used intuition and I used inference. And then the other thing I did was I spent a lot of time just diving my awareness into the source of creation and feeling what kind of responses the source of creation was coming up with for my body. And that also informed me quite a bit about the nature of the situation. So those three things: inference, intuition. So you're looking at the emotional response, kind of essentially, and then reflection from the source of creation, reflection from the environment. Yeah. Like kind of like divination a little bit at a very gross level. You could call it something like that, but more fine. Oh, no one minds if I cough. You love me. Thank you. I appreciate that. Yes. And did we do a healing or a purification? Yes, I'm feeling better. Thank you. Okay, guys, I'm a little bit over time. And so, oh my goodness. Light. Okay, we're just a little over, but I'll take this question and then That's such a good question, though. The thing is, you guys, if you throw really like awesome questions at me, and then here I am at the end. Of course, she threw it at me not too long ago, but when there was still more time to talk. But um, let me please answer your questions tomorrow. And I've got questions over here too, all kinds of yummy questions to look at over here. We'll start as usual. We'll probably start tomorrow's session with questions. So, you guys who are going to be with me tomorrow, get your questions put together and send them over to me tomorrow. And I'll just do questions the whole time through. And we will definitely, my dear, who asked this one if we could time for a healing and purification at one point. Did I do a healing tonight? I didn't really. Kind of like there was one for finding the pure potential, finding our pure potential, like a kind of exercise. But tomorrow we'll do more healings and we'll do more of all that is good and answering questions. And I thank you all so much for being with me at this very kind of rather tender time, both as individuals and as a collective. And we will dive into some of the really heavy questions tomorrow. And if you won't be with me tomorrow, if you're going to be busy, because I know it is a holiday weekend and some people have plans, everyone will get the recording. And so my husband will make sure that those recordings are out to all of you. Thank you so much for doing that, my dear, by the end of the day tomorrow, so you don't have to wait too long for the recordings. All right. Thank you all very much for being with me. Such a pleasure. It's such a pleasure. And we'll dive in now that we've kind of got some understanding and handle on what is pure potential. We'll start applying it tomorrow. Thank you all for being with me. Good night. Happy holidays.